Well, cool. So I thought it would be pertinent, being that you just got back from China, to glean some wisdom and insights. And you've been to China for many, many years. And so I thought maybe we could start with your continual journeys to China. When did you first go there? And then later in our conversation, I'd like to dive into your most recent
Yeah,
visit.
very
But
good. Yeah, I'm back from China. I'm out back in my hemp field. Uh,
hmm
all right. So yeah, I since I started in the hemp industry, I've always worked with China. My very first order of hemp fabric was from a Chinese company back in actually even as early as 93. I consider my company starting in 94 because that's, my fabric that I ordered in 93 ended up arriving in December of 93, and I began the process of selling the hemp in January 94. So that's the official start of my business.
January
So
94.
Mhm. Yeah, so 1994. So since that time, I've been to China more than 20 times in the last 30 years or so. And I have seen the entire process of hemp from the field all the way to, finished product like garments, and seeing every single step that's required for making it. My last trip just 3 weeks ago, similar story. I went there. I was a little late to see any hemp being grown, but we didn't see the entire process again of
Hmm.
how exactly that fiber is turned into fabric. And it's quite a process. There's a lot of
Hmm.
involved.
And what was the intention for going this trip? You've been over 20 times, and each time you've probably seen something new or learned something new. But what was the initial intention for going on this trip?
Right. One of the main reasons is trying to secure more seed for America to be able to buy the proper hemp fiber varieties from China, bring them to America. One aspect is to sell the seed to farmers for growing the hemp for fiber. And the other is I would really hope that some of these farmers or groups of farmers that we sell the seed to would begin to propagate their own seed, so we can have an industry here in America where I no longer have to import it, that we can start buying it from farmers who grow it here. It would be a lot cheaper if we did it that way. Probably the quality would be a lot better, and we would have it would be a lot faster. There's a good 2 to 3 month delay from the time you order seeds from China and by the time they actually get here. And America is very good. One thing we do very well is we do very good farming. So none of the seeds right now from China are certified. They're more what we call wild. Not wild, but it's just, it's grown on little family farms in China, and there isn't a lot of science behind it other than traditional farming methods. So there's a lot more variety. So even if you buy one strain, you're going to have variety in things like the height of the plant, the thickness of the plant, the exact time that it actually will flower, even the color of the plant can vary a little bit, and things like germination rates and THC levels can vary a bit more than what we would want. Especially THC levels, since in America we're required to be below 0.3% THC. And what we've seen is in the same crop, you can have some that will test at 0.15 or zero point 0.2, but then we'll see others that can be like 0.35 or zero point 0.4. Now, while all of this is below the levels of THC to really consider it marijuana or to really even extract marijuana, it's still the law, of the land that we have these lower values. So
What
I
about
think,
China? What is their regulation
yeah,
on THC levels?
they don't regulate it that specifically. Marijuana is illegal in China. You're not allowed to grow hemp for marijuana or smoking purposes. but they do distinguish between industrial hemp and smokable variety. And if a farmer is just growing it for fiber, they're for the most part they're left alone. If you were caught, say, selling marijuana and they found where you were growing it, you could get in trouble. But if you're just growing it for fiber, for the most part, you're going to be left alone.
So do they not classify quote unquote marijuana as a specific THC level? Is it more like the context
No,
of the
I
situation
think
and
it's more the context of the situation. I've never seen, a lot of the hemp that we saw in China, it's still a niche market over
yeah.
there. Sometimes people think that, hemp is a huge industry. It's not. It's actually a niche market like it is here. They tend to grow it in areas where other things aren't going to grow that might make them more money. However, on that note, China does not have as much arable land and farmland as we do in America and or Canada. Therefore, to feed their population, they emphasize food crops over fiber crops. So China, for the last few years, has actually had to import their hemp fiber from other countries like France and Turkey. There've been a couple of them, and
Mm.
now they want to import hemp from the United States as
Mm.
well.
So I have two follow-up questions on that. So first, have you ever encountered recreational or therapeutic cannabis in China? Have you ever seen it there or anybody?
I'd have to say yes.
Okay.
Uh, Not in any kind of party situation or anything like that, but one time I was visiting my friend and he was like, "Oh, look," and he pulled open a drawer and there was some cannabis flower in it, and he was like, "A friend of mine got it. It's a smokable kind." And he was like, "Do you want to try it?" No, try it, see what it is. And I did smoke it, but it was nothing comparable to what we have in America. You know,
Was it
my
Sensimilla?
no, it wasn't a sense of me. It was actually seeds in it. It had been
Mm-hmm.
fertilized, and I would say I don't know, maybe 5%.
Okay.
To something like that. Where in America, we're getting 25 and 30% THC varieties now. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
really have the odor like I'm
Yeah.
seeing here. That was only one time, and it was kind of a one-off that I saw there. China's a large country, so is anyone smoking marijuana there? Yeah, probably. I
Mm-hmm.
never saw it in terms of anywhere in public or any kind of dispensary or store or even the people I hung out with, and they were all completely ignorant to marijuana. And it
Mm-hmm.
is considered, they don't really distinguish between things like marijuana and, say, opium
Hmm.
over. So could potentially get the death penalty, if you were
Wow.
caught in it.
That was my
Yeah.
follow-up question is what could possibly happen to you if you're caught with it or selling it?
Yeah, they're very strict on drugs in China, and China does execute people for drugs.
Unreal. Wow.
Mhm.
Well, you also mentioned certified seeds and that the seeds coming out of China are not certified. What does
Yeah.
that mean? And what is the process of getting a seed certified? And could you potentially certify some of these Chinese seeds over time?
It's kind of a nuanced, complex question. So have to realize that certifying seeds is a type of legal or at least written down process. So there are actual steps that need to be taken in order to certify seeds. And it involves growing it for multiple years, having, each generation verified to be, the way you want it, have all the characteristics of what you're looking for. Then you have to kind of cross-breed that variety with itself, so you're getting a much purer and purer variety. You're basically homogenizing the variety to where you're getting all the seeds going to behave very much alike from one another. Usually it takes at least 3 to 4 years, or I should say 3 to 4 generations, 3 to 4 years if you're doing it outside and it's an annual crop and you do it that way, then you can get it certified. Now, having said that, um, the U.S. Has treaties with a variety of countries that allow for them to accept certified seed from other countries. For example, maybe Germany, France, Netherlands. So I could buy, quote, certified seed from France and bring it to the United States because of the treaty between the United States and France, where they're both agreed to follow those standards that I mentioned earlier. China does not have such an agreement. So even if they were to quote, certify the seed over there and do it following all the protocol that is commonly used, we can still not label it certified seed if we brought it over here because they are not part of that treaty.
Mm. So it would have to be completely done in the States in the same way.
Right. Yes, exactly. It would have to be brought over here, and then they'd have to go through the entire process of getting the seed certified.
And the seed certifying agency that's responsible for cataloging those seeds is it the AOSCA certification or?
Yeah, I believe that is. I don't think it's a government agency. I think it's actually a private company that does that, the AOSCA,
Hmm.
as you mentioned.
Right. Now, part of that process is stabilizing the seeds to, like you said, kind of almost inbreed it or keep breeding it with itself so it creates a stable genetic. And part of
Right.
that result is that ideally the seed is not going to go above the threshold of 0.3% THC.
Right. Well, that's just one metric that you're looking at. But we'll take something like cotton, which is all the cotton that's grown is certified. So when a farmer buys the seed, they basically it's kind of like a real insurance. You know, they know what they're getting. Every seed, every cotton plant is going to practically be a twin of the one next to it. There's very little diversity. It's a very homogeneous crop. So the benefit of that is, you know what you're going to get. You're going to know how much water it's going to need. You're going to know the kind of nutrients it's going to require. Every plant will grow about the same height. Every cotton oil produced will all be the same color. So it allows for really good uniformity within the crop. So for hemp in this case, you're going to want similar metrics. One of them, of course, being the THC levels. You're going to want to guarantee that all the hemp is 0.3 or below THC. You're going to want to guarantee that crops are all going to grow to about the same height. They're all going to be the same color crop when it comes out. They're all going to require be the same thickness of the stalk, that they're all going to flower around the same time. You don't want half of your crop to flower at one point and the other half to flower 3 weeks later. That
Right.
result in non-uniformity of that
Hmm.
crop.
Makes sense. So it's even though it's contrary to this whole movement of diversity within humanity and acknowledging, our differences in hemp and in agriculture for financial reasons, for just overall stability, for legal reasons, going this route is probably a good idea in some respects to create that stability.
Yeah, it's you got to have a balance. Again, we want things to remain natural, but humans have been breeding plants for thousands of years. I think none of the crops we really eat, even the livestock that we use, are natural and that they're not wild. They don't look or behave the way they did. Mostly that was done through natural selection, selecting for the traits that you want, growing it, breeding it back with itself, selecting again. And we usually end up with things like higher yields, better quality, resistance to pests or bacteria or diseases, more uniformity. And all of that is generally pretty good. Now, the drawback to something like that is you have a loss of diversity. For example, both cotton and corn actually can come in a variety of colors. However, when you're growing cotton, you want it white. You don't want, bits of other color in there. You want to keep it white because that's what people who make textiles usually want. On the other hand, when everything is monotonous and a twin or homogeneous, I should say, then you run into the problem if all of a sudden there is a disease or an insect pest that is able to attack it, then the entire crop may be infected. At that point, you lost that genetic diversity where you might varieties that could fight it off or not be as susceptible to it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really a kind of a balancing act to be able to get the right traits, but keep it kind of diverse enough that you can fend off anything bad that might happen.
Yeah, most definitely. So that is one of the drawbacks of homogenizing a crop or hybridizing it to the point where it's all the same expression of genetics. You have that risk
Hmm.
of spoiling the whole crop if a bug or bacteria or something gets into it without that diversity. Um,
Hmm.
so one of the things that you and I have come across over the many years being in the industry is this sort of, I guess, bad reputation that China has. How can we dispel some of the myths or unpopularity that China has in general, being a communist country and knowing that there's slave labor and toxic processes that are not good for the environment and all of that? How do you perceive the hemp industry in China, and how can we help dispel some of the negative perception around products
Oh,
coming out of China, but specifically hemp?
so, on that note, it's such a broad subject, right there. And Uh, some of it, is a little accurate or somewhat accurate, and some of it really isn't all that accurate. To take one example might be pollutions. Are they growing the hemp? Is it polluted? Are they putting a lot of chemicals on it? Pesticides, fertilizers? And for the most part, the answer to that is no. I did not see very much of that at all. In fact, most of all the hemp that I've seen growing in China was grown on naturally, mainly because people just can't afford, these farmers are pretty poor, so they cannot afford things like pesticides and fertilizers. They use, one field, they had, geese coming in that were eating all the insects. So some things are done very naturally. Also, over the last 20 years or so that I've been going to China, I have seen a lot of changes. They have enacted a lot of laws to cut down on pollution or harmful practices to the point where this past time I was there, I had never seen the country so clean. You hardly saw any trash anywhere, even to the point where it looked better than, Los Angeles, where I live, where I'm seeing a lot of trash and graffiti and just homelessness. And I saw none of that there this time. Now, what do they do with these homeless people? I really don't know whether it's a problem that's been solved or something that was swept under the rug. Other issues, do they use slave labor? That I think is mostly a myth in that I have never been to any enterprise, whether government or private, where I saw anyone who was working against their will. People are absolutely free to leave the job if they don't like it, like they are here. They are certainly free to negotiate their wages. And as China has risen in the world, their standard of living has increased, and people are paid more than what they were being paid, say, in the year 1990. My first trip to China was 99, and from that point till now, it's just completely changed. There weren't any freeways then. There were almost no high-rise buildings. practically nobody had a private car. Now it's completely different. Lots of people have cars. There's high-rise buildings everywhere. There's modern shopping centers, and in some ways, they're even more advanced than us. They no longer accept cash anywhere.
Hmm.
All monetary transactions were done on the phone that they
Hmm.
use. Everyone carried a phone with them, had a little one of those, what are they called? The little marks of the little dots. Uh,
QR code.
yeah, QR. Everyone has a QR code on their phone.
Hmm.
And when you just go to pay, you just hold up your phone and it's all automatic. Now,
Wow.
benefit of that is it's convenient and fast. The drawback is the government gets to know every transaction that you make,
Every movement. Yeah.
everything that you do.
Yeah.
Uh, as I mentioned, the standard of living has definitely increased over the years. However, they still do not make anywhere near to what we make in the United States. So,
Hmm.
people's salaries are lower. Where they live, there's very few private houses. Almost everyone lives in a condo or an apartment. They're usually
Hmm.
a lot smaller than what we're used to. They're not as nice as
Hmm.
we have here. I've seen, building standards don't seem to be as nice and good as they are here. I think they've cut costs, things like that. So that's, one level of our interaction with China. I see nothing wrong. If a country can build something or make something lower than we can, then there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to buy it. A lot of times we look at China as, quote, an entire country. So if I'm buying hemp, they say, oh, you're buying your hemp from China. Well, not exactly. I'm actually buying it from a private individual, a private company, that has its own people, own employees, and they're making it for me. And if they can do it for less, then that's actually better. It means that we can sell these products in America for less. And what happens is that's actually sometimes it seems counterintuitive because people feel that, oh, we're losing jobs to China. But what happens is when you're able to save money on products, it means you're able to buy more of other products. So it's not like the money goes to China and we lose it. It means we have more money here to spend on other things that we may like, whether it's, things of leisure or entertainment. It's actually a win-win situation. If you're spending more money on your clothes, you have less money to spend on, say, a vacation or concert tickets or something like that. So I'm very much a proponent of free trade uh,
Hmm.
overall. And I'm not alone. Most economists would agree that free trade is beneficial for everyone involved, and the restriction of free trade is actually harmful to people. If we want to do more things in America, then we have to make it easier, maybe have less restrictions on doing, less regulation, make it easier to do things in America for private enterprise, and then we can be more competitive than other
Right.
countries. Saying, oh, China has slave labor. Again, I've never seen any slave labor over there, not once. Uh,
Hmm.
do they force people, let's say you go to jail somewhere, or they force you to work if you go to jail for some reason? The answer is probably yes. But then we also do that in America.
Hmm.
And we
Yeah.
have that type of labor here as well.
Right.
So we can really point fingers to anything like that. China also has workers' comp insurance. They have Social Security or equivalents of that in their country. And then let's look at something else. What if the government is subsidizing? That is, what the government is helping to pay for something. I'm generally against things like that because governments do not have their own money. So in order to subsidize, they have to take from other people in the country. So they're basically saying, well, we're going to help this industry, but we're going to hurt these people over here. So I don't agree in things like that. Now, is it unfair? If they do that, is it unfair for Americans? And actually, the answer to that is no, because in reality, what's happening is the Chinese government and the Chinese taxpayers are subsidizing our lives over here. They're paying for part of the product, and that actually makes our lives a little bit better. But you say, oh, well, we're losing our industries here. Well, they're willing to subsidize it. Again, if I'm spending less on a product, I have more money to spend somewhere else. And the moment they stop subsidizing, then it's potentially the American products could be made for less at that point, and then we can start up the industry here at that time.
Right, which is kind of the next direction of the conversation I wanted to go, that you're currently working on capabilities to process hemp fiber in the States so that we can bring back hemp textile manufacturing to the States. So I want to talk about that in just a moment. But before we get off the topic of your trip to China, was there one big insight or like a revelation or something new that you came across that you maybe didn't know previously or that you kind of brought home with you?
Yeah, there's, I'd say, in terms of something new, I would say in terms of the country, it was a lot cleaner. I remember it. My first 10, 15 years and I went to China, there was a lot of garbage, a lot of trash, a lot of pollution. Rivers looked polluted. There's garbage all around on the streets. This time around, it was extremely, extremely clean. And you didn't see anything. So, in that regards, they have, I would say, cleaned up their act, pun intended.
Yeah.
Now, is it a matter of just having people be more conscientious of what they're doing? That's probably part of it. But it could also be they enact laws there. The laws are enacted by the government, they're not enacted by the people. So they'll enact a law that says if you pollute, you're going to jail or you're going to pay a fine, and they will enforce it over there.
Mm.
So you get more of a kind of big brother's watching you sort of attitude.
Hmm.
But I'm here in LA and we got homeless all over the streets. And, while I don't advocate putting homeless people in jail, you can't advocate for the homeless at the expense of everyone else. We need clean sidewalks. We need to make sure our communities are safe from trash, dirt, violence, theft, criminality, things like that. And I'm sure there's a balance in be achieved in that regard. Now, that was something new for China, and that things were really nice. Also, as I mentioned, my first years in China, nobody had a car. Then all of a sudden, cars became affordable for a lot of people, and you saw a lot of imported cars, cars from America, cars from Japan, cars from Europe were very popular. This time around, a lot more cars are electric cars that are actually made in China. And I would say almost 50% of the cars now were domestically made and they were either electric or an electric hybrid. And I had heard stories that they're not made very well and fall apart or whatever. I could not see evidence of that. The cars seemed perfectly normal and nice to me. I didn't own a car for 3, 4, 5 years, so I don't know what would happen over time. But to me, they seemed okay. And
Hmm.
I didn't see anything wrong with it. And they're able to make these electric cars cheaper than we can make them in America. The
Yeah.
US just outlawed the importation of electric cars from China,
Hmm.
probably realizing that they'd be able to flood the market. People, a lot of people would start buying them. That doesn't mean that American companies couldn't go over there and make these cars if they
Hmm.
want to sell them back here. Again, if you want to buy an electric car and you're going to buy one brand, it's $35,000 for the car, but then you have another brand that's only 25,000. Well, we're able to buy the $25,000 car, you have $10,000 extra to spend on something else.
Yeah,
So it
exactly.
doesn't mean that we really lose anything. There's just maybe that particular industry.
Mm-hmm.
On the other end, your question, did anything else really stand out? And again, I went to a couple different factories and witnessed, again, firsthand, the entire process of hemp being taken from a fiber and turned into a fabric. And I can tell you right now that industry is not coming back to the United States, no matter
Really?
what. Yeah, no matter what we do.
Why is that?
Two reasons. One, uh, that industry requires a huge amount of investment. These machines were enormous. Some of them, they took up entire rooms. 40,000 square feet, rooms, that with
Mm,
machinery that would have ran in the, millions and millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to put it all together.
wow.
So in one sense, it would require a huge amount of investment. But then on the other hand, it still required a certain number of people to operate those machines. And uh, labor is just cheaper over there and it's cheaper in other countries. So
Mm-hmm.
things like apparel, soft goods, fabric, apparel, home furnishings, accessories, most people buy on price. They don't want to have to pay too much. And these sorts of things are just not really going to be made here anymore. And even to prove my point, they're not even necessarily going to be made in China in the future. The standard of living has gone up in China over the past 20, 25 years. Hence, people's salaries have gotten higher and it costs more to hire him. My partner over there, he had a cut and sew factory. So this was a factory that made garments. And I was very impressed because it was the most modern garment manufacturing facility I had ever seen. All of the cutting of the fabric was done by a machine where you just load, it's run by a computer, and you load in the drawing, CAD drawing of it, and the patterns, and it looks kind of like a printer sort of thing with a laser, and then it goes through and it just automatically cut all the pieces automatically. You don't even need a person to do that anymore.
Wow.
Then the individual pieces got bundled up and it was picked up by a machine that was attached to kind of a system that could automatically move it around. This is similar to what Henry Ford built, where it's an automated system of moving all the various parts in a factory to where they need to be located. That's already done in America for a lot of different things, but here it was being done entirely for the apparel industry. So little things were hanging from a little rod and they automatically go around. It could automatically count them. It would bring it to the person that was doing the right kind of sewing. When they were done, they'd finish their part, put it back up, and it would automatically move to another table where somebody again would be doing the cutting and sewing. So that entire system was automated, yet my partner said, we can't compete. He says, we're actually more money here than other people. And I was kind of shocked. I said, what do you mean? He says, we have to pay our workers more money than what somebody in, say, India,
Mm,
Burma, or Bangladesh, or
mm-hmm.
Indonesia, or Africa,
Vietnam.
Vietnam, they have an even lower standard of living. It's
Hmm.
still a huge part of the expense is paying these actual workers. They can't necessarily compete anymore.
Is that specifically for apparel and garments, or is that for even the textile manufacturing process?
It's even for both. So for garments, you still need a person to operate the sewing machine.
Mm-hmm.
A room full of people, each with a sewing machine, and they're all sewing one little thing. So there's a lot of people that are doing that. Even when they were making the textiles, we actually went to two factories. One was older, one was newer. And the newer one had about a third of the people that were needed in the older one, because again,
Mm,
everything was kind of automated for what
mm-hmm.
we're able to do, and boils it down to, as much as somebody in America says, oh, we have to buy American, we have to support American values or, American industry, that reality when you go, online on Amazon, and you look up your product and you see 10 different people selling the exact same product, you're automatically going to go for the lower price. I don't blame you. And, maybe you could be a patriot and say, well, I'm only going to buy the one, that's made in America. But the reality is most people don't actually think about things like that. Normally,
Mm-hmm.
especially, in an era of inflation when things are tight, when you're on a budget, when you have to worry about, might not have enough money to pay rent or buy food. You're going to generally, when you buy your clothes, you're going to probably shop for whatever is cheaper, especially if everything else is the same in
Mm-hmm.
that regard. So, getting to my point, I don't see the apparel industry or textile industry coming back to the United States, at least not anytime soon. Is
Well,
that
does
gonna
that mean these other countries have some ability to grow and process industrial hemp for textiles, like Vietnam or Singapore or these
maybe,
other countries you mentioned?
depending on where you are in the world, the climate, the soil, enough flat land, people can grow crops, but as you know, different crops are grown in different areas, and people specialize in what grows the best. Hemp, for it to grow best, it doesn't grow that well in the tropics. You don't have enough daylight for it to grow. So I don't see us growing fiber hemp down there. You need a more northern latitude for it to grow.
Hmm. Wouldn't they run into the same issues as the USA in terms of growing, harvesting, processing, and then all the 8 or 9 or 10 steps from going from seed to fabric? Like, wouldn't they have to invest the hundreds of millions of dollars to build machinery to do that to compete with China?
A little bit. America, what we're very good at is farming. So we
Hmm.
probably have some of the most sophisticated farm equipment in the world where, one person on a tractor can harvest, you know, tens or hundreds of acres that, say, 100 years ago required 100 people in order to do it, maybe even 200 people who had to get out there with hose and do it all manually. We have, the best genetics for our farms, the best methods of monitoring it. So, in terms of growing things, America does that incredibly well. You go to these other countries, even in China now, they were still doing a lot of the harvesting by hand. We would have, for example, we were there looking at the seeds, and where we may have a machine that will go through a field and just chop off the top of the hemp plants and collect the seeds automatically. They had 100 people go out in the field, chop each plant individually, and just start shaking it to try to have the seeds fall out onto a tarp. So even though they aren't paid as much, 100 people are a lot of people, we can still do it cheaper here. So in terms of, what's going to happen with hemp, well, there will be, when we grow the hemp here in America, farmers will be able to sell the bass fiber and the herd. For certain industries that will have to be exported to where these things can be made at a lower cost. Other products will have to still be made here because maybe they're too bulky or too heavy, or they have such a low value that it doesn't make sense trying to ship it around the world.
Which is where you're kind of taking the lead in terms of fiber processing here in the States. Can we get kind of as our last topic here in our conversation? What are you doing to be able to grow and process industrial hemp for textile purposes? And what's going to happen with that fiber since we don't have the supply chain here in the States?
All right, so America does do farming better than just about any other country. We're very good. We got the huge amount of farmland. We have a good population. We have the know-how. we have the engineering, we have the technology to farm very well. However, hemp's been illegal to grow for, I think, around 80 years. It was outlawed, I believe, in 1938. So after we're out, 75, 85 years or so that hemp has been outlawed to grow here. So the technology of growing and harvesting hemp basically was non-existent for all of this time. So what I've been doing over the last couple of years is trying to work on improving and developing farm equipment that takes advantage of the technology. So we're going to be able to do it on a much larger and cheaper scale. What I'm currently working on is something called green decortication. To understand that, you got to remember or realize, you look behind me in my image back there, you can see there's a hemp being grown. That's hemp that's very green. So this picture is probably taken in August when hemp is still alive. It was currently, how you would do it is you would chop it down, and you can actually even see the hemp sitting in the field right here after it's been chopped down. And what would happen is the hemp would have to both dry out, and then it would have to ret. Ret is a form of rotting. And you need that in order to be able to fully separate the bast fiber from the herd fiber. I happen to have, here's a hemp stalk, and you can see the bast fiber is actually the bark. This is what makes the hemp fibers for textiles. The middle part that's in here, that is the hemp herd. That's the woody part. We use that for making things like hempcrete. So in order to make this a viable product, you have to be able to separate the two. So traditionally what you do is you chop it down, you let it lay in the field, and then you have to let it sit there for a week or two so it will be partially decomposed and broken down by bacteria. After it's partially decomposed, the fibers will more easily separate from one another. If you don't do that, they're kind of stuck to each other, and it makes it very difficult. But if you let it decompose, it makes it a lot easier to separate them. So currently, you're chopping it down, you're letting it sit in the field to ret. Then a baling machine will come along, and it will bale it all up and turn it into, it'll look like a big straw bale that actually contains the whole hemp stalk. This then will be sent to a decortication facility, which is a big factory with equipment that will break apart the stalk and attempt to separate the fibers. So you end up with the bast fiber and the herd. There's a lot of problems with this current method. Number one, when you allow the hemp, as you can see back there, to fall down and rot in the field, that's dependent on the weather, temperature, and humidity. You need a certain amount of humidity for bacteria to grow. If the humidity is too low, the stalks will just dry out without really decomposing at all. If the humidity is too high and you're not careful, it can over decompose. And if that happens, you end up with weakened fiber, which is a big problem. Also, there's more water on the part of the hemp that's touching the ground versus the part that's along the top. So you can have uneven retting within it. And then three, if you get an issue where, let's say you cut it all down and then it rains for a couple of weeks, you can't do anything, you could lose your entire crop at that point. So it's time consuming, it's unreliable, there's a lot of variation, so there's problems with this method. So what I figured when I grew hemp for the first time, I realized that when the hemp is still green, as you see right here, the fiber actually separates quite easily while it's fresh and wet. And so we're developing a machine now that can go through the field and both cut down the hemp and decorticate it, separate that fiber all at the same time. And this has a lot of benefits. right there.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you are doing it all in one shot. So the time involved is very, very quick. So the amount of time to just chop down the field, you're also doing the separation. You are eliminating the entire retting process. So you no longer have this variation or variability in how the fiber is actually retted or decomposes. Number three, since it's all separated at the same time, you have a lot more just overall uniformity with the fiber that comes off of it. Another issue is you no longer now have to send the bale to a decortication facility. And at the current moment, there's only a handful of deportation facilities in the United States. I mean, it's better now. I mean, 3, 4 years ago, there were none. Now there's probably about maybe half a dozen to a dozen that are out there. But even then, in order for this to be economical, you have to grow the hemp, I'd say, within 20 miles of this deportation facility. Otherwise, you're paying for the transportation. The green decortication does not require that since the equipment is used right on the farm. You can just grow the hemp anywhere, decorticate it right there on the farm. And the farmer now will be able to make more money because he's now selling, he's not selling the whole hemp stalk known as hemp straw, but now he's selling the separated fiber and herd, which has a lot more value. So the income for the farmer will go from around $800 an acre to about $2,400 per acre, where the cost of the fiber, the bast fiber will drop from about $1.40, $1.50 a pound to about 70 cents a pound. And the cost of the herd will drop from about 45, 55 cents a pound down to about 20 cents a pound. So less than half. So this makes when the farmer earns more money for growing it, and the raw materials end up being less than half of what they were before. This opens up a lot more industries for hemp. And then
Mm-hmm.
lastly, you don't have to build a deportation facilities. He's running the millions of dollars for those to get set up. So you're not waiting for anything where our in-field decorticator, green decorticator, will probably be less than $500,000. And if
Wow.
we figure starting out, it will be able to harvest about 650 to 800 acres per season, or about 4 acres an hour.
Phenomenal. So
Mhm.
about a half a million to invest in one of these machines. When are
Yeah,
they going to be available? How can people
I'd
learn
say
more?
if everything goes right, we may have some available around the middle of 2025.
And how can people get a hold of you, get in line, put in their request,
Well,
or
I would say write to me at contact@hemptraders.com if you're interested in something like this. We can certainly I can tell you more about it or put you on a list to be one of the first to be able to buy one of these machines. But I will say we've been working on it for about a year and a half, 2 years now, and it does work. This is not a hypothetical. The machines have been built and we have tested them and they do actually work. We're just now in the process of refining them so they just work a little bit better.
in fact, didn't you just process over 20,000 pounds?
Yes, we actually, for the first time ever, were shipping a full container of this green corrugated bass fiber to China for them to make it into textiles. And from what they've told us on earlier samples, this fiber is the best quality fiber they've ever seen.
That's great news. Well, this has been really insightful. Thank you for all of your years of dedication and commitment to this industry and for going over to China again,
All right,
getting
pleasure to talk
your
with you, Tyler.
yeah. Any last comments or thoughts that you want to share with people that are maybe wanting to get into this industry?
Yeah, well, I got into it, in 1990, I read The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and, I realized that there was an entire industry that could be developed, and we weren't doing it simply because of the laws against marijuana prohibition. And I didn't agree right away. I did my research on it, and I realized, gee, hemp does grow more than cotton. You get more fiber per acre. You get more wood than you do from trees in a 4-year period or so. And also looked up, yes, you can make paper from hemp. You can make textiles from hemp. You can make wood building products from hemp. So all of this was real. So I got into it, but I never thought it would take so many years for us to re-legalize hemp. But I do want to say that expression, good old American ingenuity and know-how, we're now on the cusp of being able to realize our dreams using the right technology and determination. We are going to start seeing hemp being able to be used for all of these products to better the environment, and it costs less than, say, cotton or flax or other similar materials or trees. So, this is going to happen. We're right about,
Hmm.
we're just now ready to do it.
Yep. It's an exciting time to be alive, especially in the hemp industry. So if you're considering getting into this, definitely reach out to Larry, see how you might be able to contribute to this process of bringing hemp processing back to the States. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And thanks again, Larry. Appreciate you
All
being
right.
here.
Thank you, Tyler. Have a
All
good
right.
day.
Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Bye-bye.